Welcome back to Basic Blaque After Dark and part two of our mental health series with Dr. Carolyn Stephens. In our last episode, we broke the silence around mental health. Tonight, in the weight we carry, healing trauma and resilience, we explore the invisible burdens we carry, the generational trauma that lingers in our lives, and the powerful role resilience plays in our healing. We are breaking it down, breaking cycles, and building tools. Please welcome Dr. Carolyn Stephens back to Basic Blaque After Dark. Hey,
Yes, good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
how are you doing?
I am doing well. And as always, I am so glad to be here. And I want to say hello to everybody that's going to be joining in and those that are going to be watching the replay. Good evening to you.
Well, again, thank you so much for being a part of this series because mental health is just so important and bringing awareness to it is very important. Some people bypass it, but not here on Basic Blaque After Dark. So I want to start with the basics of understanding trauma. What is trauma and why do different people respond to it in such different ways?
Okay. So, uh, good question to ask to talk about such a in-depth and maybe a layman's term. I would use a heavy topic, but that's a good place to start and a good time for us to be talking about this as well. But so I want to make the answer kind of basic, not too clinical, so that people can understand a basic understanding of what is trauma or psychological trauma. But trauma is basically a severe emotional response to a stressful event that overwhelms a person's ability to be able to process it emotionally.
Hmm.
So, at some point in life, we all experience a traumatic event. And then when it's defined as psychological trauma, it means that that person is having challenges responding to that event to the point where it fractures their ability to be able to process it emotionally. So that's a basic definition for what is trauma.
What came to mind, and there's something I hadn't even prepared to say, but with your explanation, what came to mind was I don't know how many people remember the show, but the episode on Good Times when the father, James, had passed away and the children were grieving, but it didn't appear that the mother was grieving. And
Yeah.
they seemed to be very concerned that they didn't feel as though the mother was grieving because she didn't cry and she was laughing with the guests. But she did have a breaking point. It did get to her when she was in the kitchen. She did break that plate, and that's when they came out and she came together with her children. So people do have different forms and ways of dealing with trauma, especially when we're talking about the death of a loved one. So I get what you're saying that it is. The response is very different for very different people in many different ways.
Exactly.
So, what are some overlooked or unexpected forms of trauma people may not even recognize?
Okay. So trauma is basically kind of broken down into maybe we'll say three subtopics, right? So you have what's called direct exposure. So that's a form of trauma. An example of direct exposure would be someone who has been abused or sexually molested. That's what we call direct exposure trauma. Then we have what's called eyewitness, meaning that the trauma or the experience didn't actually happen to you, but you witnessed it. You were an eyewitness to it. And that's why a lot of times in places of employment or in schools where there's been a shooting, or something like that, they will call in a trauma team to help people to be able to process what it is that they have seen. Not that it necessarily happened to them, but they understand that being an eyewitness to a traumatic event, sometimes people don't respond or process that well. And then the third category would be indirect. So an example of that would be children living in an abusive household. You know, they may not have actually seen dad hit mom, but maybe they've heard, you know, or they're affected by those two adults, like the behaviors, or they're affected by mom's behaviors. And so that's what we call indirect trauma. And people sometimes, especially children, uh, don't always respond well to those levels of trauma. So that's how trauma is basically broken down. There's not really one that's worse than the other. It just it just gives you an idea of the variant or variances of the different kinds of trauma, and that's important to know when you're the person or the practitioner that's providing traumatic informed care, because these are the kind of questions or kinds of things that you would need to know. You know, were you in the house? Did you see something? Or did you hear something? Did somebody tell you, which would be a form of indirect trauma? So those are the different kinds of trauma, and people respond to those in different ways. Uh, People respond to trauma in different ways because it depends on how they grew up. You know, it depends on how long they've been experiencing the level of trauma, and whether it was direct, indirect, or you were an eyewitness to it. It depends on that. It depends on your level of resistance. It depends on whether or not you're dealing with multiple traumatic events. You know,
Mhm.
you've heard people say, "I just can't, I just can't take a break." Uh, Looks like one thing is happening to me right after the other, that kind of thing. So what they're talking about is they're experiencing traumatic events back back to back. And so in layman's terms, what they're saying is that I now am becoming extremely overwhelmed, and I'm not having enough time to mentally process one thing before something else happens. And so that's going to affect the way that they deal with a traumatic event, because maybe they're just coming out of one, and now it's being layered by another one. Or like, let's say in the case of abuse, where they're experiencing traumatic events regularly. Like, it's every week dad beats mom, or now mom beats dad. They have it both ways. But that's some of the reasons why people deal with or respond to trauma in different ways.
So, in every form of trauma that you described, I also feel as though it can be generational and culturally impacted. How is trauma passed down through families and communities?
Okay, so that's a good question. And the best example of passed down trauma, you know, because people talk about generational wealth, where wealth
Mhm.
is passed down, and not necessarily wealth being passed down, but the knowledge of wealth or how to obtain wealth is passed down from generation to generation. Trauma works the same way. You can have what's called generational trauma. So, the best
Mhm.
example that I could use of that, which is what usually I typically like to speak on, is slavery and how it affected the African diaspora. Um, Over 450 years of trauma. That would be uh, I would say probably one of the best examples from my cultural perspective, out of my cultural
Mhm.
lens,
Mhm.
being a black woman. Now, of course, if I was a Jewish woman, then I would use the Holocaust as another example of traumatic events. The only difference there, and I bring this up so we could see uh, how you could look at one culture that seems to have, generally, an overall spectrum, seems to have healed from their trauma in comparison to another culture who still seems to be dealing with some of the symptoms. So, Holocaust was certainly uh, uh, a traumatic time for the Jewish population, because I don't want to speak as if though I'm minimizing it. However, there was support for them when they came through that. There was support, there was financial support, there was mental support, emotional support, community support, those kinds of things. Whereas when you compare it to the Black experience, right? That we experience ongoing trauma, and we are still experiencing ongoing trauma. So, to
Mhm.
your question, how does trauma get passed down? How do we define generational trauma? Is because when there is no process of healing for trauma, and that particular family does not heal from the traumatic events that has happened in their family. People don't talk about it, families don't discuss it, or communities don't discuss it or look for ways to heal. Then that generation dies off, and those behaviors having been witnessed, or either the younger generation under them is affected by those behaviors due to trauma, then those behaviors get passed down.
So,
You know,
as a clinical therapist, say you have a client that says, "Well, that's the way we deal with it in my family." What would you do, or what would you say to help this person process what may have happened in their family, especially something that has continuously traumatized the family over and over, or something that is continual to impact the family over and over again?
okay. So if a person comes to a person like me, the first thing is that if you're coming to a therapist or peer support person or trauma informed coach, if you're coming to a professional person, it is assumed that you know that there is a problem, because that's why you're coming to a person. So, yes, a person may say, well, that's just the way it is in my family. And that may be a very true statement, that that is the way it is in your family. But my question would be to that person, so tell me, why are you here? Why are you here in my office? We don't use the couch anymore. So when you hear me say, "Why are you here on my couch?" I'm speaking in a literal sense. But so why are we here today? And then that's going to give a person an opportunity to talk about some of the things that they have identified. Okay, so that's the first and foremost, is that yes, a person may say, well, that's just the way it is in my family. But
Mhm.
obviously, you have identified that there is a problem, that there's no sense of normalcy in your family. And you're also saying to me that you possibly want to do something you want to do something about it. You want the buck to stop here. You're the person that doesn't want the trauma passed down to your children or to your grandchildren.
So that could be, or would you say that could be a form of coping um, for that individual? Because coping versus healing is definitely two totally different things. So, what's the difference between simply coping with trauma and truly healing from trauma? Because just say that same individual say to you, "Well, I'm coping with it," but they may not truly heal from it.
And that is true. And that's indicative of most people. Uh, where you're surviving and not thriving. Okay. Our ultimate goal as human beings is or should be is for us to be thriving, for us to be living. So there may be that same individual who identifies, they may not know what to call it, uh, or how to define it, but they have an understanding within themselves. I am not thriving. I'm just surviving. I'm going through the motions of life. And I have identified that. And I've also identified that something needs to be done about it. And I personally need some kind of help. And that's why a person like me would see somebody, because they they know that they need some kind of help. So the difference between coping, so let me first say this: all of us cope. Okay, all of us cope. We all have developed coping mechanisms. For example, a coping mechanism, I was speaking with a colleague about this today. When a problem arises, remember, trauma is depicted upon how people respond to a stressful event, right? So
Mhm.
you may be an individual that when stressful events happen or traumatic events happen, you may say, okay, I'm gonna deal with it. Okay, we call that fright or flight in therapy, meaning you don't address it, you don't try to look for the details of it, you don't try to heal from it. You just say, I realize it happened. I'm just gonna keep it moving, yo, as they used to say, right? That's an
Mhm.
example of coping. And the thing about that is that when you continue to cope in that way, after a while, you become a very stoic person. A stoic person can appear to be a person that is unfeeling, that is not empathetic or sympathetic. Some people may phrase it as a person who is cold.
Yes.
Sometimes when people are labeled as being cold, it doesn't mean that they're a cold individual. It means that maybe they have had years and years of experiencing trauma, and they had to see what's going to happen naturally with us as human beings. We're going to find a way to cope. Coping, everybody copes. We're going to find a way to cope. And when you have been dealing with trauma after trauma after trauma, naturally the brain says, hey, don't deal with it. Okay. And the next thing that comes along that looks like it may be traumatic, you just throw it out. You just don't deal with it. But after a while, it's going to start to pile up, right? And when it starts to pile up, okay, then it may come out. It can come out in the form of anger, that you become the angry person.
Mhm.
uh it may come, some of us in our families, we had that one aunt who everybody says she was just mean, right? Well, it's not necessarily she was a mean person, but we don't know. Auntie may have dealt with or survived a lot of different, traumatic events, which is why she learned how to put her guard up, and it is now a coping mechanism. So sometimes when we see certain behaviors, it's really how a person is coping. Okay, it's how a person is coping. So that's what coping is. Healing looks like it doesn't affect my ability to interact with people, to socialize with people, and I'm at a level of peace in my mind and in my heart and in my soul when we come to a place of healing. And I have to tell you that that's a little harder for women, because we um, we handle trauma differently because we are naturally receivers. And so we receive a lot. We are emotional beings, so we receive a lot. And therefore, we handle things in a much, in a much different kind of way. So that's basically to answer your question, what the difference is between coping and healing. But we all cope. Everybody copes. It's just a matter of whether or not you are using unhealthy coping mechanisms, or you're using healthy coping mechanism. But everybody copes. We all cope.
To piggyback off of what you said about the women, I feel as though it's also that women have a different support system than men.
Sometimes.
We're easier. I don't want to use the word easier. I think that sometimes we're more comfortable in reaching out and allowing people to come in than some men. I won't say all men, and I won't say all women, but I find that to be some things that I've seen in my history of dealing in the field that I'm in. Now, just imagine that someone, a friend, recognize when their friend is surviving instead of living. Would you suggest, or do you think it's best that they do an intervention for this friend, or would you
Oh boy.
suggest they just be a part of a support system by just listening and really not doing anything?
I think it could be either or. Uh, because when you talk about doing interventions, you got to remember exactly what the word means. Is that there's a group of people, I'm going to presume a group of caring people who are a part of the person's support system, and they now are going to somewhat bum rush the person, right? I'm using layman's terms here, or they're going to intervene. I think that there can be a good solution. You really have to weigh it out, um, especially if it is a situation with that as a result of trauma, the person is now self-harming themselves. And what I mean by self-harming, they're self-mutilating, which is cutting. That's a lot of young people, especially young girls. They're they're involved in substance abuse or alcohol. So areas where they're physically self-harming, intervention can or may be a very good thing. Intervention doesn't have to be a very clinical situation. It could be that a friend of yours just got divorced and she has some friends that are really concerned about her behavior after the divorce. And they get together and have some tea, and say, hey, because what intervention is supposed to say, an intervention does not say we're here to make you get better or do something or behave in a certain way. Intervention clearly says we love you. We have identified some changes in your behavior. We are concerned and we want to know how can we help. That's what intervention is supposed to do.
We
So
have
intervention can.
we have an individual who said that she has been called cold-hearted, and that she does agree with what you're saying, or maybe what I said, but it's more than likely than what you said. But I know that individual, and what I'm going to tell you myself, I don't think that you're cold-hearted. I think that you're direct, and some people can't handle it. So just continue to be yourself. Don't worry about what other people are thinking. Maybe they need to try to hold space for themselves before they try to hold space for you. So just keep doing you. Okay, they'll
Well,
you know.
I've been accused of being harsh, and I think 95% of the people who know me and have interacted with me would definitely disagree with me being personified as a harsh person. But I also can understand how those individuals that would label me as being harsh, I could see how they could come to that conclusion. Because depending upon the situation, that it called for me to be stern in that situation. And what happens is, now I want to give two sides to this. So what happens is that for the individual that does not care for you being stern because they just do not want to accept or hear the truth, well, then you're going to be labeled as being harsh. I mean, that's just flat out truth. You're going to be labeled as being harsh. However, I try to be objective in my approach, because here's the thing: have I always been, um, you know, have I always dealt with situations in my life as maturely as I deal with them now? No, I have not. Not even with my own children. So, through maturity, we learn how to handle people, how to manage people, how to manage things, especially when you're a mom, a single mom, you've got little kids and big kids, and you got life, you got jobs. The truth of the matter is, you just might catch me on the wrong day. It's okay to not be okay. Okay, but what healthy people do, it's not that because you're an emotionally healthy person that you will not have those times. But emotionally healthy people are able to identify that, hey, today I am not in a good space. Perhaps I spoke prematurely, that kind of thing. And they will go back and say, listen, I know when I said this to you, I may have said that a bit prematurely. I did mean what I said, but I didn't want to say it in the manner that I said it. And they're going to do it that way because they're doing that for them. They're doing it for you, for yourself. So of course there's kind of two sides of things. Of course, when I was younger, coming straight from Brooklyn, New York, I was not I was not as genteel as a person that I am, because your environment has a lot to do with the way that you respond to things. I don't I hope there's no New Yorkers here on the call, but I will say your demographic area where you are raised up. If you're from New York, we have a tendency to be quick and to the point and not to a whole lot of detail, and that can appear to be abrasive to some people. When I moved here to the South, I found that people moved a little slower. They talked a little slower. They were a little bit more calm. And honestly, when I first moved to the South, I was like, what's up with these people? You know what I'm saying? Because we used to say, just speaking directly. So I think communication is very important. I've had conversations with friends of mine who are Southern bred, and I had to explain to them from what culture I came from, and they explained to me what culture they came from. So communication is always going to be the key before we assume. Because here's the thing that I found with women, especially, is that you flat out don't know my story before you label me. You don't know my story, and you don't know where I've been and how I've been and why I've been. And so it's quick to label people when you don't know their story. As a diaspora, that happens to us on a large scale, because we get accused of things, and we have certain behaviors and we're labeled, but you don't know my story, or you don't understand my story, or in most cases, you don't care about my story. There is a reason why Black folks act the way that they act. We're not trying to make excuses for people's behavior. That's not what I'm saying here tonight. I am saying, though, that people just do not wake up one morning and decide, hey, I'm going to be on drugs. This is going to be a great day to be on drugs. Hey, I'm going to just be an alcoholic. This is a great day to be an alcoholic. You know, people don't wake up in the morning and decide to do those things. There is a story behind why they manage their pain in the way that they have chosen to manage their pain. And I will say this, and then I'll close my mouth. And some people handle or manage their pain. It has a lot to do with how society, how community, and how family manages that person as to why that individual sometimes continues to stay in pain. Same thing has happened to us as a diaspora. The oppressor who oppressed us now is wondering, why are we acting the way that we do? Really? So it's something for us to just wanted to throw that in there, something for us to think about.
Well, I want to piggyback off of two things that you said. I'm also from New York, and I've gotten that same thing from several people. And yes, we are. And I'm not saying anybody else from any other state is slow or anything else, but I'm going to speak for me. I'm quick with it. No matter what it is, I'm going to be quick with it, and I'm going to get it over with and move it on because I don't have time to sit there and explain or train you to anything. So I just let that go. I also agree with that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. And that's what I normally tell people. But we have some people who chimed in. Trevita says that she agrees with both of us. Thank you, Trevita. She also says that they would usually say it after she put a boundary in place that she refused to move. And from the Crew podcast, they're saying some people just can't deal with truth, especially when it comes with corrections. They go on further to state that, let me go down a little bit further. Wow. That some people get
That was a
comfortable
good
in mess and become content with where they are, and the truth sometimes takes them out their comfort zone. And if you are bold and direct, some people can and will take it the wrong way. She truly agrees with the communication is key 100%. And that she says, come on, Dr. C, you speaking some straight facts. Javita says there's a trick that leads to that decision. And I agree wholeheartedly with you all, especially with what Dr. Carolyn is saying about individuals. We carry the weight of so many different things and so many different things from our ancestors. How can we begin to identify pain or emotional baggage that's no longer ours to carry?
So that's no longer ours to carry. Wow. And that's a heavy question, because a lot of times we are carrying baggage that doesn't have our name on it. But the
Mhm.
first thing we have to do, and always you're always going to hear me say this as a clinician, identifying an issue is the most important part. Sometimes it takes months for me to help a client to be able to identify the issue. So the first thing we have to do is that we have to identify, and we have to be to related to your question, we have to identify my stuff, your stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
what was mine and was yours. Okay,
Yeah.
once we kind of identify that, and then put them in the buckets that they belong in. This is my stuff. This is your stuff. Then we have to start to ask ourselves some really hard questions. Do I need to be owning your stuff? So I'll help people out with that. The answer is no, because that's why it's called your stuff and my stuff. Period. Right? Okay. Now, if if I love you and I'm connected with you, I'm going to, for example, use a mother and children, a husband and wife, or a a person and a partner, what have you, then I'm going to be affected by your stuff. I'm going to be affected by your stuff. And because I'm affected by your stuff, your baggage, there's a certain amount of that every now and then I might carry it, but we have to be real careful about, I would say, about the way that we carry it. So I'm going to shift here just a little bit because I am a spiritual person, right? I'm not a religious person, but I am a spiritual person. I believe that the best way to deal with somebody else's baggage, once we identify my stuff, your stuff, they stuff, right? Is the first of all, the prayer is the way that I'm going to manage somebody else's baggage because that don't belong to me, and I can't carry somebody else's baggage, but I know somebody who can, and his name would be called Jesus Christ. He can carry all the load. We are not Jesus Christ, all right, and we don't carry other people's load. Sometimes we just carry other people's stuff because we don't want to deal with our own stuff. And so it's easier for me to carry your stuff and manage your stuff and deal with your stuff because it takes me out of the realm of having to deal with my own problems and my own baggage and my own situation. And so it's nothing wrong with saying to yourself and even sending out the memo, listen, I have enough of my own to handle, and I do not have the bandwidth to manage your baggage and my baggage. So here's what I'm going to say to you, and whatever that something may have to be.
There seems to be a lot of resilience with individuals who carry on a lot of the weight of others, and for that individuals carrying the weight, sometimes it appears that there's very little hope, but they continue to push forward. How do you see resilience not as perfection, but as the power that grows from our scars?
Well, and again, y'all will hear me say that a lot, and I'm glad that I'm on a platform where I am free to say that. So first, to answer, you address your question culturally, and this is a fact. This isn't from Dr. Carolyn's head or because of what I want it to be or my opinion. The Africans, and talk about Africans, we talk about Black people, right? We are by far the most resilient culture that they are. Other cultures will say the same thing. We are the most resilient. Okay, women as a subculture in the African diaspora, we are very resilient creatures because we've had to be. Because we've had to be. Um, I feel like I want to shift here and say this, Black, if I could,
You sure
to make
do. Go right ahead.
somebody in our viewing audience. You may be a person that the family has always accused you of everything, whatever they could think of to accuse you of, and but you have always had to be the most resilient person in your family, right? You've had to be the one that carries a lot of the load of the family, and for that reason you may just get accused of a lot of things that may not have anything to do with with that, but because you have been identified as the nucleus of the family, the person who is the strength or strong in the family. And so I would say to you, if you are that person, it's okay for you to give yourself a break. It's okay for you to set boundaries. And it's definitely okay for you to begin to find a support system that may not be part of your family. Because honestly, sometimes family may be the problem. So you may have to go outside of family in order to get the support that you need, which is how we can continue being resilient is through doing self-care, or do what I call the soul work. It's through having a good support system that helps you to maintain, that helps you to stay strong, that helps you to thrive, not just survive. That support system that tells you, hey girl, go give yourself a break. Go get your nails done or your hair done, whatever that looks like. That support system that does not require that you always have to be strong. I tell people that I love, you don't have to be anything when it comes to me. All you have to do is wake up in the morning and just be. And that is really what love is supposed to look like. We're not supposed to be impending, putting a lot of expectations on people, because we never know if you keep putting expectations on a person and keep putting them on 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 until one day the whole bow breaks, right?
Okay.
Because you got too much impounded on. So what do? You don't allow yourself to get here and here and here and here and here. At some point, you need to holler and tell somebody, "Hey, I got to stop here." So I think you mentioned that there was somebody who said they set boundaries. Yes, you need to set boundaries when you feel yourself you're getting on overload. You need
Yeah,
to
she also
you
states
need
that she completely agrees with that and that she did the inventory of what things that she was carrying that wasn't hers and the weight that was hers. She lifted that it was lifted off of her. She gave it to God for him to help them handle it. So yeah, I can't say it any better way than she said it, and any better way than you have spoken it. Give yourself permission to give yourself permission is what I would say to anyone
yeah.
who's trying. Are there everyday practices that can help us build emotional resilience?
Absolutely. To build emotional resistance, give yourself time. Give yourself give yourself me time. So for me time looks like when I wake up in the morning, I have a morning ritual which consists of drinking a bottle of water. That's very important. I drink a bottle of water, pray, meditate, and either do some kind of affirmations or inspiration. When I'm spending that time in the morning, I'm not going to answer the phone. I'm not going to connect with anybody. I'm not going to speak with anybody because it's my time. And the reason why I say that's very important, because it used to be a time that as soon as I hit my it looked like as soon as I wake up, people just knew to call me. Like they were, what is that? Tell it, it's something, I forget what they call that. But uh,
Telepathy.
I don't allow. Yeah, that's what I mean. So I don't allow that. What I do is, if I give myself permission to give me time. That's the first thing I would say. Give yourself time. I also have a me day. Okay, um, I give myself what's called a Monday. I have to credit that to a very wise older woman who told me that I needed to do that. So I have a day that I designate for myself. Sometimes I follow it, sometimes I don't. It's the day that I do whatever it is I want to do. Okay. So give yourself time, give yourself permission to love yourself. And I know that that may sound a little strange, because most people would say, oh, I love myself. Well, then I'll leave you with this question, and I'll leave it blank. If you love yourself, why are you, and I'll leave it right there. If you love yourself, why are you see? So that's why I say give yourself permission to love yourself, give yourself permission to have space. And somebody does not always have to be in your space, and whatever that looks like. I am finding now that my life is very busy, and so it's requiring that I utilize tools now in order to manage my time. That may be in the form of an assistant, that may be in the form of of a business number and a personal number. And the people that love me are not going to get mad. Oh, well, she thinks she's somebody because now she has an assistant answering the phone, or now she has an. Well, yes, ma'am, I do. And the real truth of this, yes, I always thought I was somebody. For the people that would say, well, you're full of yourself, my response is yes, I am very, very, very full to the brim of myself because I love myself. So kind of practice doing things like that and loving yourself and strengthening yourself on a daily basis, whether that's doing affirmations, through doing breath work, through meditation, deep breathing. All of those things fortify you as a person, but you must give yourself the time in the day to work on you, to work on yourself. And that is okay. And if you have to tell people, listen, girl, don't call me until after 10 o'clock, it's okay to do that, because that way they understand from the time I wake up until 9:55, that's my time, and I don't want to share it with anybody. I want to give me that time. And I would tell you from my own personal life, I think that that would be a very valuable step in building resilience.
Yes. So those are some of those practical tools, which will also include journaling, taking deep breaths, the affirmations that you had mentioned. So that's some places that people can start. I also want to say blessings to you too, Simone. Thank you so much for chiming in. So the support systems, when individuals are navigating trauma or life's adversities, support is essential. How vital is a strong support system in the healing process?
The healing process can't be done without a support system. It cannot even be done without a support system. You have to have a. So when I'm dealing with a person who is going through a crisis, we have identified that there is an emergency situation that has happened, or a traumatic event that has happened that has impaired the person's ability to be able to function or process on a regular basis based on our definition of trauma. Okay, then one of so here's the thing for those of us who we have that person. We're not talking about ourselves here, but we have that person who is now experiencing a crisis. The worst thing that we can do is say, for example, say, "Oh my God, Travita, how did you get yourself in that mess?"
Mm.
Well, girl, what happened? Well, why did you? That is the worst thing that we can do, because that we now put that person on overload. What we want to do in a crisis situation is get them out of crisis mode. That's what we want to do. So, to your question, some of the things we want to ask. Okay, who do you have that's willing to support you during this time? Because now we want to help them set up a support system. There's lots of people that I have that will say, I don't have nobody. That's part of the problem. I don't have nobody. So I take them through a series of questions to really identify that you don't have nobody. Okay, but if you really say you don't have nobody, then we want to find you somebody. And the thing about setting up a support system, everybody on the team doesn't have to do the same. It depends on the person. It depends on the ability of that person on the support team, what resources are available to them. So it could be the person that may not have time, but they can give money. It may be the person that has time, but they don't have no money, so they can call that person. They can go by and check up on that person. It may be the person who likes to cook and says, I can go by and bring them a meal. It may be the person who's good at finding resources, and they can say, I can find some clothes. I can find. Everybody has their part that they can play. But if we sometimes we have to help a person build a team. And then let me tell you the most important question, and I'll end on this. When you find yourself in a crisis, don't do it alone, because you can't heal alone. It is okay. It is okay to tell some people who you trust. Now it has to be people you trust. Hey, it's me. Listen, I have a challenge that I'm going through, and how much of that information you care to divulge is totally up to you. And I would like to know, would you be my support person through this? And yes or no?
When you ask for
Hmm.
that type of help, it's not a form of weakness. I want you to know that it's one of the
Yeah.
strengths that you may not have known that you had all along. Asking for help is not a cowardly thing to do. You know, it's the beginning of your journey when you start to ask others for help, and you'll see that they're there for you. Sometimes some people don't know what to say or how to say it because they're feeling as though that they will offend. But just simply ask them for the help. Tell them, look, I'm not in a good space right now, and I may need your support. And it sounds a lot easier coming probably from someone else, but you try it and you can practice it every day by asking different people that you support, that's in your support family. You'll start to build on that, and you'll be surprised at the people that you thought was not part of your support system. They're there, and they want to help. So, what role do faith, culture, and chosen family? And I use chosen family loosely because some people say you can't choose your family. You can actually choose your family. What role do they play in
Yeah.
supporting the healing journey?
Well, all of those different factors play a very important role in healing. Uh, some of the questions, and I ask all those questions when I'm on the journey with a person. I like to refer to therapy as a journey. So when you hear me say on the journey, and I will ask them, uh, what is your level of faith? Where are you spiritually? I'm not asking them what religion they are, but of course they may tell me. But where are you spiritually? Because what we want to determine is that what what role does faith have in your life? So from that, if you are part of a faith-based community, a church, a synagogue, a mosque, right? Then the suggestion would be perhaps someone in the faith-based community that you ascribe to could be part of your support system, and that's going to be very important. I know it is for me. Lots of times if I need support, especially because I give out emotionally, so sometimes I need emotional support. I may turn to the faith-based community as I know it and say, hey, I just need for y'all to pray for me. Okay, that kind of thing. Culturally, yes, of course, within your community, whether that's going to be a community center, whether that's a social worker that you have grown fond of or in a relationship with, that she knows or he knows you, you know them, or whatever that may look like socially for you. The community could play a great part in your healing by simply offering resources.
Yes.
It could be that. So all those people that you mentioned, uh, I would say they're all needed. Because if we talk about holistic wellness, then we must embark upon integrated health, meaning that we need a team of people. It takes a team to be able to help a person out of crisis. So yeah, I think the
Dee
teamwork. Yeah.
Dee says, God bless you with the tribe for a reason. Love it, Dee Dee. Thank you so much for chiming in. And Shavita comes back to say, God connects us those who bring us closer to him and the purpose that aligns with our destiny. You guys are so on point, and you're definitely paying attention tonight, and you're definitely dropping so many nuggets for other listeners and viewers. Some who may not feel as though that they can come forward, or feel as though that's not me. You're not talking about me. But look within yourself. It might just be you. You might find somebody in there that may just surprise you. Somebody that you haven't seen or heard from in a long time. They're there. They just they're just there. They're just waiting for you. Okay, so I just want to thank everyone tonight. We unpacked the weight we carry and what it means to begin the work of letting go. As Dr. Stevens reminded us, our scars may tell the story of what we've been through, but they also prove that we survive, and survival is the strength we carry. As you move through this week, ask yourself this: what emotional weight are you still carrying that no longer serves you? The weight that you're carrying, not someone else, the weight that you're carrying that no longer serves you. I don't want you to miss part three of our mental health series with Dr. Carolyn Stephens on October 21st, where we move from surviving to thriving and redefine what true strength looks like. But first, join me on Thursday, October the 17th at 8 p.m. as we welcome author and dynamic poet Keisha Johnson McRae for a conversation you won't want to miss. As always, thanks for keeping it basic.